Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to take a look at a technique, or probably more of a model for constructing layered graphics called parallax. You've seen this a lot in websites. You've seen it in some different types of animation that people will do for productions. And I want to show some ways you could do this inside of Vmix using just the capabilities that Vmix provides. But before we get to that, I want to welcome everybody. If you have any questions, have any comments, just post them in the section below and we'll get them live on air. Also, if you would like to join us, we do have a link in the show notes and right over here, over on the side. So this, if you click on that, somebody will be able to get you on air and join us live here. All right, so let me jump into the topic, and I want to talk a little bit about what parallax actually is before we talk about how we're going to use it. One of the things that you will notice in real world physics is that if you're looking straight ahead at something and starting to move, what you'll notice is that the object that is further away, like a distant lake or a mountain or something, will appear to move much more than an object that is closer by. And that's just sort of the relative distances. And this is something, if you've ever done camera work, where you zoom in on something, small movements make huge differences in what you actually see in the lens. So it's that same sort of principle. And what we're doing with parallax inside of a production is that we're putting an image on one layer and then an image on a second layer, and we move those at different speeds. So when the person is looking at that, they perceive that same sense of depth that they would have from sort of their native intuition when they see that sort of thing in the real world. That implies that something else is further away from the thing in front. And that's what we're leveraging here. But before I show you that, let me just jump over to our comments here, and let's see if we can see who's here. So thank you. So do not do anything crazy. Oh, you made it. Excellent. So yeah, I was going to say, don't do anything crazy. Don't respond to comments in the car. So, all right. So great to have you here, automation. Yeah, it is very similar to that. So that's something we can definitely talk about, automation. So thank you for joining us here. Michael, always good to see you. Thank you for joining. Bill, I'm glad this is the best part of Fridays for you. I definitely appreciate that. So thank you. Spatial, always good to see you here, Spatial. Thank you. So Nomi, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly. I apologize. Thank you for joining us. I definitely appreciate you making the time to be here. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by just showing you something of an exaggerated example here, which has a football player sort of positioned in front of a stadium. So these are two independent graphics. The stadium image is in the background, and then in front of that, we have this football player image. And the way this sort of parallax would work is, now this is greatly exaggerated, but you can see when I did that motion here, you sort of do it again, and you have that motion, you can see that the back is moving at a different rate than the foreground. And, we're doing the tilt and everything to sort of accentuate this. But that gives you a sense of that front foreground object is separated by some space from the background object. And that's what we're working on here to sort of make this effect work inside of Vmix. And the way we're doing this is simply through layers and what one of the capabilities Vmix has, which is the merge transition. So let me show you instead a probably a more realistic example next, and we'll talk a little bit about how we did this. So this next example, I'll just set it up, is sort of an intro that you could use for like a sports match. And this is a basketball example we have here. But what I'll do is I'll just play this, and then we can go in and talk about exactly all the elements that are involved in how we set this up. So let me switch over here. And so this is sort of an intro that I did where you have a tunnel, which is typically the thing that sort of the players would run out before a match. And we are stacking that and then putting a graphic up as, that sort of pushes out to the side. So let's talk a bit about how we set this up. So essentially in here, we have a set of layers. We have, if I go over here, you have this sort of stadium tunnel layer here. So I'll sort of click on these and put them in preview so you can see. So this is basically a PNG file where that's empty. And this is sort of the tunnel walking out. We have a basketball court layer that's sitting here that we're using, and we stack those one behind the other. We have a graphic over here, a title over here. And what we're doing with this title is we are using a mix. So if you look over here, we have a mix which has a blank and then the actual title. So as we're sliding out, as we're sort of pushing into this merge, we are using a little script behind it, just a set of shortcut calls that activate the transition, the fade-in transition. So you see this now all happening together. And the way that this movement happens when we have all these layers is that we have one, let me sort of go over here. We have one input, this first one over here, which has the layers, all these layers set up, but they all set up at different sort of positions and scales. So if I just go into here, that's the basketball court, and it starts out sort of full screen and, just sort of moved down a little. And then as we push in, we'll go to our other. So this would be our sort of our end state that we're looking for. And if I go back in and look, you can see now we're at 1.5 times. So we've really zoomed in on that image. But at the same time, that tunnel started out. If we go back over here, the tunnel image, which is sitting right here, that tunnel image also starts out at 1. But if I go, let me sort of move this out of the way here, and so I can click. If I go over here, the tunnel image zoomed in even further. It zoomed in 2.4. And what that did is it pushed it all the way off the screen. And to make that look okay, we put a very high resolution image for the tunnel. So as we did that sort of more than double zoom in, I think this was like almost a 6K image in terms of resolution. So when we pushed in on that, you didn't see it get fuzzy or more blocky. It actually kept the resolution on that. And the other thing that we did to sort of help tie this together is that we put this little sort of glow overlay, which is sort of sitting, let me get out of here, sorry, which we actually have as a downstream key. So if you notice, let me just sort of play this again. We can play it right from here so you can see. As we do this, you'll notice there's those colors that are sort of flashing over there to give it that animated motion. I did that in a couple of the examples we have, but that is basically being done as an overlay that we put up to sort of see it down here. Because I've taken it off. But so that's this light leak overlay. It's just a video loop that we have that has sort of those flashing lights that sort of are on the edge, and we made it, pretty much almost transparent. Like there's only 10% translucency to it. So you are basically seeing the entire image movement that takes place here, but you're doing this on sort of under this glow. So it creates that dynamic, that motion, sort of like the flares that go off when players take the field or, whatever you'd have there. So it just is another thing to distract from any sort of non-realistic relative movement. Because, this is hard to get in something like this exactly 100% right, because you're sort of approximating the changes in the start and end states. But this will definitely, add a little extra flair for that. And we have that set up. And let me actually go over and I'll show you the shortcuts that we're using to drive this sort of tunnel movement. So we start by turning all the overlays off. We take our mix one. If you remember, I said we had that sort of light leaks thing with the different colored lights. We set the mix one, which is what we're using to fade that in. So we have our main mix and then the secondary mix. So we're setting that to blank, waiting a minute, and then we're setting the preview on that to the preview input for mix one to our game of the week. So that's I'm sorry if I'm not talking about the light leak. That was my mistake. We're talking about the text that we want to show for the title. So in this case, we are putting that in as blank, and then we are putting in the game of the week title, which is that NCAA Division II title that comes up. And so that sets that all up for our title, and that is in a separate mix. Then we're going through here and we sort of set up the main mix, which will have our tunnel in state and then all the things for the overlay. So we start by cutting to the tunnel in, which is where you can see the court way in the distance. Start those lights playing, let those play for 1.5 seconds, and then we connect over to the tunnel out. And we set that in as the preview input, wait just a bit to let it set, and then we do a merge. And so this merge is taking place. So this is something that is really important when you think of how scripting works. What the API function does is it sets off this merge transition, but it doesn't wait for it to complete. So this is something that applies to other things. So while this merge is going out, while that transition is happening, the fade on mix one to put that title up is actually taking place as well. And it's taking place at a slightly faster rate. So it's sort of just beating that to be fully visible in the final render. And then we just wait for, like 4.5 seconds. And then we, take and turn the flashing light effect from the light leaks off, which is we're using an overlay for. So this is basically what we're doing. And by setting this up as just a sort of a script start dynamic, we can just plug that in and we don't need to do, any serious scripting. These are really just all shortcuts that we're doing here. And I thought this was sort of a good way to sort of look at a first practical use case and also tie together the fact that when you trigger shortcuts, they happen and you go to the next thing. So if that takes a period of time, the next action will be triggered before that period of time is up. It just gets that going and then it starts the next one. So that, in this case, we're using this to really good effect because now while that slow merge is happening over 3 seconds, we can do a fade up of our title for this. So that's the first example that I wanted to show. We also have a second example which involves sort of player highlights, if you want to sort of call out some things regarding players in the game. So before I do that, though, let me go over. We have a few more comments here, so I want to make sure I get to everybody. JP, glad you made it back. Always good to see you here. Thank you. And we have Chandra from India. Chandra, thank you for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. And Alex from Italy. Hello, Alex. Thank you. So, Marco, always good to see you, Marco. Thank you. And Manjit, can we use 3D virtual set made in Blender in Vmix? So that's the quick answer is not directly, but the more in-depth answer is if you decomposed it into layers and constructed things as a foreground and backgrounds and plates for UV maps and the like, you could take elements that you rendered in Blender and create Vmix virtual sets with them. So that probably requires a more in-depth discussion. So I don't want you to take that as sort of the final word. But actually, our next show is going to cover stuff with virtual sets. So that will be in a couple of weeks. But so I'll try to talk more in the post show about this, and maybe that will give you a better sense of how that could actually be leveraged. Oh, Mega Cyber Plus. Thank you. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us from Nigeria. Okay, so the next example that I wanted to cover here deals with a basketball player. And lots of times you may want to sort of call up, whether it's somebody that's starting, somebody that just made a play, and you want to call up some statistics about them. That's what we really designed this example around. And in this case, we are using two transitions. So we're doing one as a zoom in and then another one as a side zoom. So let me show you what that looks like, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how we did that. So let me see here. If I look at the output. So here we go. This is a different one. So let me get over here. So this is an example where I'm zooming into the player. Then I slide over and I put some details about the player there. So if you look, now there's a few things in seeing this. When I have the player here initially in their sort of first state, so let me see if I can just cut and we can talk about this. So this is their first date. And I'll take down the overlay. Shut that off. So if you notice, this is sort of where the basket is. You can see their sort of elbow positions relative to the stands. But then if I actually cut and looked at, zoomed in, you can see now that that has shrunk. And so the background sort of has, gone lower relative to the eye line that you have here. You can also see from the sides that he is, you can see that there's been movement. So if I play that again, you sort of watch these areas as I do that, you'll see the parallax take place right here. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. Let me stop that and go to the right one here. So here we go. So I'm zooming in and you can see those motions happen. And then you can see that this was a slide over where now the basket is visible. And that's sort of what you would see if you moved the camera to the side. You'd see more of the background as sort of the way your lens would work as we pop up this graphic. And we did this where you can have, two players. It can be a second player, and then you have them come in, and you get, again, that same effect. The goal here is really to start to create a more dynamic interest in what you're seeing on screen, whereas opposed to just putting up sort of static graphics, you're still using just static images. All of these things here are just flat layers inside an input in Vmix, but it's doing those merges that do it. And the way we did that inside of the Vmix preset is very similar, but in this case, we have three different sort of end states. So we start here, and that's where we go as our first shot. We do the merge over to here, which gives us our second shot. And then right before we bring on the graphic, we do the merge over to here, which frees up the space on the side of the screen and creates that separation between the basket and the players' heads. So that's really three. And if I jump over to the scripting, this is actually, again, these are very, very simple types of scripts. We just get everything set up where I start with the wide, start the light leak going for giving that flashing effect, wait half a second, set the preview, and then I start the merge. Basically, let the preview set, and then I start that merge from happening. And what I'm doing as that merge is happening is I'm picking up the data source row. So that little blurb on the side that changes player to player, I could set that up so if I pick a new player shot and a new blurb for each time I run this, you could do all that right here. And so that just picks it up, waits for the merge to complete. So you notice here I'm sleeping for just over 3 seconds as this merge finishes up. And then I do the preview to the slide left and go in there and I do the merge. So this is giving me sort of everything I need to get that all on screen. And, from what we're doing here in this layout, we now have a very simple way to sort of control the timing and all the dynamics. And you may not want to do something which is fully realistic. Maybe if you remember how we started with that football player, that was really overly dramatic, but maybe that's what you want. Maybe you're going for something that isn't realistic, but is more eye-catching. And you can use it for all of those things. So we did this more as trying to emulate what you would see with a real camera movement, clearly not perfectly. We have a lot to go to get that right, but we tried to be close to that. But like I did with that football player in the beginning, you could definitely see maybe that's more exciting. Maybe that's a better way to do an eye-catching factoid you want to put out about somebody. And that's fine too. This is really just a creative process around how to create imagery that sort of engages and delights the viewer. And that's really what we wanted to do here. But this is all done inside of Vmix. And I think that's a lot of people talk about doing things with parallax, but they're using things like After Effects or Motion or other things like that. Or they're pre-rendering things. The great thing here is that I can pop in a new player. It works. I can, change the text between, events. All that works. And, hopefully that will get you thinking about some of the things that you can do, and maybe not all sports based. I mean, there may be things in, corporate productions you do, which could really benefit from this type of approach, putting a corporate logo and an executive sort of where the executive's in front of the logo and you sort of see that difference in motion there. And that just could create an interesting dynamic while you're introducing panelists or other things like that. So some cool things you could definitely think of here. Okay, so I know this wasn't a very long show, but I think some of the concepts here do have a lot of applicability. So hopefully you found it useful. For our next show, we won't be doing a show next week. As I said, we're sort of in our postseason, so we're trying to get a lot of prep work done. But for next season and for other things we have to wrap up for the start of this year on the business side. But on our next show, it'll be a week from next Friday, so 2 weeks from today. We'll be covering something with using virtual sets in a totally different way. Something that maybe you didn't think about that has a lot of power. If you put it together. So we'll cover that in 2 weeks. So stay tuned. If you want to hang around for the post show, I'd love it. We'll go in. I know we have maybe a few more questions that people want to ask or other people that have signed in to say hi. So we'll cover that. If you can't, I will see you in a couple of weeks. So take care, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our post show. Thank you for hanging around. So we have a Jeff from Uganda. So hello, thank you for joining us. I appreciate that, Jeff, from Intermax Networks. And David from the UAE. So David, thank you for joining. That's great to have you here. And let's see. So, yep. So automation, yeah, I will. That's my little bit of a teaser for what we're doing, but I think you may find it interesting and useful, and something that has some real practical application. So you'll have to wait to find out. So I don't like to do teasers, but every now and then, figure it's our postseason period. So we'll have a little fun. So let's see. So Manjit is saying, can you direct me to any playlist that guides everything about virtual sets? I don't actually, we've done some shows that go into details about virtual sets and how to construct them, because there's a config.xml file which describes the sort of the layouts of all the elements. You have UV maps, which allow you to map elements into different planes inside your virtual set. And then you have different positioning details, and that's all described in the XML file. If you look up Vmix virtual sets XML, that will do that. We've done a couple of shows. I can try to post them I'll post them in a comment after here, where we can share some of the virtual set shows that we've done, just if you want to follow up from that. But there isn't a huge amount online, but I'm sure if you got onto YouTube and hunted around, you may be able to find some other things. I just don't have a sort of a playlist for you off the top of my head, but hopefully this will be give you a good start on that. Uh, so, so Whit, thank you. So he says the show is right up my alley for my sport, hockey. So yeah, so I know I've done a few of these, but I've just found that there is a lot of interest in sort of graphics in the Vmix space and different ways to do things beyond just sort of the flat graphics. So I know we've done a lot of shows, and I tend to do sports only because I have a lot of sports assets available to sort of do these things to demonstrate it. But yes, this is definitely something that I think you could use as another style of intro for players or teams or other things like that. So glad you found it useful. So uh, so JP has anyone looked at the new Zoom feature in vMix and adding titles? Any suggestions? So I haven't played much with it. Uh, it does work in many ways similarly to vMix Call, uh, insofar as you just have that video coming into vMix, and then anything you want to do with sort of overlays, you can do sort of technically. I do not know if the metadata around that guest is delivered somewhere, and I again, that's what I said. I haven't played with it in depth, so I don't have a good answer for you. But if that metadata is discoverable and is shared, then there's no limitations around how that can be sort of layer composited to present titles. I'm just not sure whether that metadata is made available. And that goes for everything from like, hand raises, agree, disagrees, all of those things that are in Zoom. I'm not sure how much of that is sort of transmitted through with the way vMix implemented the Zoom API. But definitely, if anybody else has any information on that, please share it here. That would be great. All right, so let me just give a little bit of background to this. What I was looking for when I did this was, as I said, we're getting a lot of interest in vMix related graphics, and I know we've done shows where we actually had videos playing in the background, and we sort of stacked these things as layers and launched them. But I still felt that was, even though there was motion in the graphic, it was still more of a sort of a general static graphic. And it also works really well if you're sort of confined to a like a lower third or something, sort of a sidebar or something on the screen. But I was thinking for sort of full screen graphics, it isn't necessarily ideal. And I thought, this may be something that was interesting. So let me know, because I'm always interested in, especially, if these shows on graphics are useful to you, we'll try to do more of them and find, more interesting ways to take care of stuff. But this is definitely something that we plan on revisiting unless you sort of steer us in another direction. So let's see. So JP is saying their demo shows triggers to switch to speaker, but also no idea on titles. But okay, yeah. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of this is very similar to vMix Call, but I haven't done a deep dive on that. So maybe that's something we can definitely look at for a future show as well. All right, so Bill Mew, Bill, always good to see you here. Thank you for joining. So Manjit, is there any efficient way to do camera coordinates, camera movements? Manually mapping coordinates is very tedious. So if you're saying to sort of, and again, this I'm trying to infer because there's a lot of different use cases for that. If you're doing something where you'd want a person to move in sync with a background, so you sort of say, I know if I'm changing a PTZ camera, you can take those coordinates and sort of pump that into something inside of vMix. The quick answer is there probably is. So I think there's a camera protocol, I believe it's called 3D, which is sort of a free 3D protocol for PTZ cameras, which will give you sort of coordinate data delivered from the camera that you can then pick up. So I could definitely see that you could do something where if you were doing a camera movement, you could make something happen inside of Vmix through scripting, where you could make an adjustment to a layer. All those things are in there now, where you can, configure individual layers in a lot more detail than you could in versions of Vmix previous to 27, the current version. So there may be something you can do, but that being said, this is not going to give you sort of a seamless three-dimensional virtual set. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's not going to look 100% right. And the first thing is, you are in a PTZ camera, when you do a rotation, the angle is changing at a background. So just moving that background isn't going to necessarily give you the look that you would be expecting. So if that, background, if you move the camera and you're just using a virtual background, there would need to be some more things you would do around that. And there's a lot of very expensive technology that is used to try to get that well synchronized. And it isn't easy, So, I mean, I'll definitely start, there. There's a lot of things that go into this. This is really where things like Unreal Engine come into play, where you can take and use camera tracking, things like the Vive. I forget exactly what the name is, but it's from the company Vive. That maybe the Mars is sort of sticking in my head. That will give you sort of camera positioning data and feed that into Unreal Engine, and then you can use that in a constructed three-dimensional environment to control the camera in there in sync with the camera externally. But that really is a sort of a level outside of what you could probably do with the same scale of believability inside of Vmix alone. So just a thing to keep in mind. So Michael's saying he read about GYU doing a large Zoom meeting panel and 500 spectators. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. And so let me sort of break this into two different ways. When you talk about spectators, you're really into the realm of sort of the Zoom webinars and that piece of the sort of Zoom puzzle, so to speak. So if you want in a Zoom webinar, the participants, the spectators, don't see each other. So they can all join, and there's a level of anonymity. And for a lot of people, they prefer that because they don't really want to be on camera, but they still want to watch a presentation that could be given. That can be fed from a system like Vmix, and then you could bring in guests coming in from Zoom on Vmix and sort of combine that, where I have one thing which is a Zoom webinar and another which is a individual Zoom guest coming in, and you could pull those together and make that sort of connection happen. That way you could scale way up on the number of viewers, because Zoom webinars can handle that, and there's different price tiers for the numbers, but that doesn't really require scale on your part. You're just going to feed video to them. And then on the other side, you can use the capabilities inside of Zoom, or shameless plug, something like Live to Air with Zoom. So you can sort of pull that together and do those types of panels. But there are different ways to do this. There's things you can do with breakout rooms inside of Zoom for different purposes, and so lots of different ways here to set these up. But maybe that could be an interesting show, how to sort of pull some of these large sort of webinar presentation style meetings together. So I'll add that to my list of things to see if we could make work here. Okay. So Michael saying his lesson learned, have 2 Zoom meetings, panel with Vmix, spectators in their own reading. So, oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, that's, I'm sorry if, yeah, he said it went fine until they allowed the spectators in. So, okay, I'm sorry. I'm not keeping up in real time with all the comments. So Michael, yeah, that's, yeah, you doing that, keeping them separate is 100% correct. So sorry about that. I didn't mean to dive in and sort of stomp all over your later comments. So sorry about that. But yeah, that's, you can't have people randomly join. You need some sort of buffer when you have that many people. And that's definitely the right way to do that. But I still think it could be an interesting show because there's still a lot to put together around these types of things. All right then. So I guess we're probably at a good point to wrap up today's show. Since all of you hung around through the post show here, I'll share a little bit more about what we're doing in 2 weeks. What we're pulling together is a virtual set that allows you to basically take, in this case, we're using a football helmet, another sports-based graphic, but we're going to use a football helmet and allow you to dynamically change the color, dynamically apply a team logo to it, all while keeping it photorealistic, and then being able to take that and put it as a layer inside of other elements, inside of other inputs that you're using for a show. So very easy to sort of change the color and branding on football helmets. So this is something that we thought would be another interesting use case. So that's a thank you for everybody for hanging out to the end here. But so let's see. So we just have, I think, just one more comment here, and yeah. So yeah, 500 visitors or spectators is a ridiculous number to try to manage individually. So I think the Zoom webinar approach is probably really good for that, where I'm not pulling them in. But so Manjit, thank you for joining here. It's great to see you as part of the community here. So thank you. All right, everyone. So we are going to do a wrap here today. I appreciate all of you making the time to watch every Friday. And we will see, as I mentioned, we will not be here for a show next week, but in 2 weeks we will. So I will see you all then. Until then, be well. Take care.